Valyria, the great freehold fractured into warring cities and upstart nations, ripe for the taking. Out of the east swarmed the Dothraki, the horse lords of the plains who feared only defeat and dragons. And now the dragons were all gone. Under the great Khal Temu, they sacked and burnt every town and city in their path. No army could stand against them, because the Dothraki do not stand. The horse lords do not draw up battle lines or hide behind shield walls or lair themselves in armor. The Dothraki charge. Their blades are more scythe than sword, the better to cull the infantry ranks without breaking stride. Even their archers fire from horseback so that advancing or retreating, the arrows never cease. To the Dothraki, a man who does not ride is no man at all, without honor or pride. When the city of Quohor realized Khal Temu was coming, they strengthened their walls, doubled their own guards, and hired 2 full companies of sellswords. The Dothraki were used to glorified farmers with spears. Quohor would show them a proper army, with mounted and armored cavalry to match the Horde's own. As an afterthought, the city leaders sent an envoy to Astapor to buy Unsullied. The slavers had always claimed that the Unsullied were the great Giscari legions come again. Few cared. The dragon-burned ruins of Old Geese were a stark reminder that the age of the foot soldier was over. The envoy had his orders, however, and quickly bought 3,000 Unsullied for the long march back. For Unsullied do not ride. But while they marched, Khal Temu arrived at Quohor. I can imagine how pleased the Khal was to finally face a challenge. By the end of the battle, crows and wolves feasted on what remained of Quohor's heavy horse. All the sellswords had fled. Quohor knew that the Dothraki would very soon break through the gates to rape, slave, and burn at their pleasure. Yet the next day, Khal Temu woke to find, before the gates, 3,000 eunuchs in formation, armed with only spears, shields, and spiked helms. The Unsullied had slipped past the Khal's army in the night while the Dothraki feasted. Khal Temu had many times their number and could easily have flanked the small force. But to the Dothraki, men on foot are fit only to be ridden down. 18 times the horse lords charged, and 18 times the Unsullied locked their shields, lowered their spears, and held the line against 20,000 Dothraki screamers. When the Khal's archers rained arrows on them, the Unsullied lifted their shields above their heads until the squall passed. And then they held the line. In the end, only 600 Unsullied remained, but more than 12,000 Dothraki lay dead, including Khal Temu and all his sons. The new Khal led the survivors past the city gates, where one by one, each man cut off his braid and threw it down before the feet of the Unsullied, defeated and shamed forever. Since that day, the Unsullied fill the ranks of cities and households wealthy enough, or desperate enough. Sellswords fight for gold, knights for glory, and Dothraki for blood. To a man, the Unsullied fight only to obey. With the right master over them, imagine how the forces of chaos would break against their shields. The conquerors, the madmen, the usurpers.
Man, it'll be cool to be considered one of the greatest fighters, but what y'all gotta go through, and then to be completely obedient, that means you had to really go through some crazy shit. You know what I'm saying? First and foremost, you castrate me, you might as well kill me. I'm done with life. I peeped out the trailer for season 5. Grey Worm pushing up on stuff. Like, dude. I don't even want to talk about it no more.
Growing up, my sister Sansa loved stories with princesses and knights, but I always wanted to be scared. When my turn came, I would ask old Nan to tell us of magic and monsters.
I know. I've seen you in season 1, my boy.
The children of the forest sang the song of the earth, and the earth listened. Magic was strong in those days, and the children could commune with all the beasts of the forest, streams, and air. The greatest of them could even leave leave their bodies to hunt, swim, and fly in the skins of animals. They were the first wargs. Then, the first men came with fire and sword. They burned the weirwoods and cut down the children. Calling on dark magic, the children raised the sea and shattered the land bridge that the first men had crossed into dawn. When that failed, the children brought down the hammer of waters upon the men, flooding and transforming it into the bog it is today. After peace came, the two races shared the land and the children's gods for thousands of years. Now comes the good part. Nobody knows how or why, but the magic of the children began to emerge in men. Maybe one child in 1,000 would be born a warg. Fewer still would be born with the sight. Old Nan would not speak of it, and Maester Lewin never believed in it. But with it, the children could know of events far away and even those still to come. Some say the sight was the children's most powerful and terrible secret, and helped turn the tide during the long night. Magic has since fled our world. Among the small folk, any child suspected of being a warg will be left out to die. Beyond the wall, though, a careless hunter might still find his prey's claws and teeth, and a man's mind to guide them, for the wildlings have a different idea of monsters. But even wildlings keep their distance from a warg, because, and here old Nan would lean in close and whisper, how can you tell if the man is wearing the beast, or the beast is wearing the man? Now, old Nan has no more tales, and Maester Lewin will never scoff again. That's fine. I don't like scary stories anymore, because I'm in one.
This shit really like
Like the Starks, the
oh brother.
Back to the first man.
But yeah, this shit really the
Singers call those.
And one of the goddamn reasons for this shit really the story about the children, dude. You know what I'm saying? Not even like, you know, I'm trying to think. When listen, Spider-Man 2, after the Doc Ock fight, he's just a kid. First and foremost, Tobey Maguire about 30. About 30 right there, like, dude. But you know how they be like, oh, that person 20 years old, oh, he's just a kid. So not even where young adults type shit is considered a kid. Nah, but it's really just the kids in this bed.
It's times the age of heroes. A mask for a savage world that bred savage men. The Lannisters swindled their enemies. The Storm Kings hammered them, and the Starks cut off their heads. In such company as this, were the Boltons really so indelicate? Unlike some other houses, my ancestors owned the Bolton words, "Our blades are sharp." They passed down not a Valyrian greatsword, but a knife, honed and thin enough to fit between the topmost layer of skin and the tissue below, and peel. For as we all learned as children, a naked man has few secrets. A flayed man
has none. Yeah, that shit kind of fire.
In those
but
dark days, they said
damn,
that some of my more willful forebearers would even wear their enemies' skins as cloaks. But no such tokens remain.
but y'all whisperers,
Existed. Certainly not hanging in some secret
goddamn
room
Leatherface.
as old wives and fools insist. I suspect my house itself was responsible for spreading such rumors in the first place. Few weapons are as effective as terror, and this was an age of war. House against house, brother against brother. The Iron Men were on the rise, and never far from our shores. We must have seemed ripe for the taking, too busy fighting each other to deal with the raiders as they deserved. Thus the Starks took it upon themselves to unify the North. Under them, they drove the pirates out of White Knife and claimed the eastern coast.
Golly,
Married
babe, you
the
look like
March King's
Fenris.
daughter for the neck. A Stark wrestled for Bear Island and won. Or so they say. Silly stories. Blood and steel won the North. The Starks had the most of both. After years of war, my ancestors gave up their barbaric practices and bent the knee to their new kings. Thus House Bolton became what we are today. Loyal bannermen and staunch ally to the Starks. And the second greatest house in the North.
Yes, Sirski. Shout out my girl Brienne.
Tarth has lulled many a novice sailor into complacency. Our lush island sits on calm blue water like an emerald set into a sapphire. You would never guess that such a vision is only the sheath hiding the blade of Shipbreaker Bay, with its treacherous tides, unpredictable gales, and sharp rocks lurking just below the water's surface. The storms that blow through the bay water the Kingswood and Rainwood, two of the great forests of Westeros, and they give the Stormlands their name. Even without our weather, we have more than earned our name in strife. The first Storm King, Durham, started his reign by declaring war on the gods themselves. He loved the daughter of the sea god and the wind goddess, but they forbade the union. At their wedding, the gods unleashed their might, pulling down his hold and killing all of Durham's family and guests, though his wife shielded him.
Let me ask you something. Those who, seen show, read books, I'm curious, what adaptations have you liked and disliked the most? Like, for instance, I can't say through and through, but to a certain extent, I was a Walking Dead guy. Shane, that was my guy in the show. I messed with him. In the comics, he was not really a damn thing. Or let's see, Andrea, she held it down in the comics, but in the show, she was trash. Carl kind of the same thing as Andrea. So is there anyone let's just since Brienne's talking right now. Brienne in the books, is she fire? And then in the books and less fire in the show, or is she, just to use the example.
Durham vowed to rebuild, and when he did, the gods again destroyed his home. His counselors begged him to retreat inland, but he would not abandon his wall. Finally, with the council of the Children of the Forest, or perhaps a young Bran the Builder, Durham raised a seventh castle that, try as they might.
That's why I like watching adaptations first before coming back to the, I personally like that better. Fewer things is going to be better in adaptations than it is in the source material. So with the source material, it's kind of like, it's like you're viewing it two times. When you're going from source material to adaptation, you're like, damn, they cut this. That was my favorite part. You just cut it out.
And still do. The wind and sea gods could not tear asunder. Durham took the name God's Grief and called his new home Storm's End. Having beaten the waters to the east, the Storm Kings turned their gaze to more practical enemies. The Reach, Riverlands, and Dawn. For thousands of years, the Storm Kings fought the Gardener Kings of the Reach and various families of Dawn for control of the Dornish marches just below the Red Mountains. The fighting didn't stop until Dawn married into the Seven Kingdoms, a mere 100 years ago. But still the houses of the Stormlands, such as the Dondarrions, guard the Bone Way, the mountain pass into the marches, against any Dornish incursion. The Storm Kings had greater luck to their north, at first. They took the trident from the River Kings and built an empire that stretched as far as the neck. But then the Ironborn swarmed out of their islands and pushed the Storm Kings out of the Riverlands. No doubt the Ironborn intended to expand their empire into the Stormlands. Before they had a chance, Aegon Targaryen landed with his dragons.
You say goodbye.
Aegon burned the kings of the Iron Islands, the Rock and the Reach, His fiercest commander and rumoured bastard brother, Orys Baratheon, set out to subdue the Stormlands. No matter how fierce a warrior he was, no one could have envied his task. Storm's End had seen thousands of years of war and never fallen. But Argilac, the Storm King, chose not to barricade himself behind its walls, and gave Orys the battle he must have hoped for. Orys slew Argilac, and took Argilac's castle, kingdom, daughter, sigil, and house words. House Baratheon became the lord of the Stormlands. Targaryen rule quieted the Stormlands for the most part, until Robert rebelled against the Mad King. His first challenge came not from the crown, but from his own bannermen, who tried to join forces against him. Robert struck first, defeating 3 armies in a single day at Summerhall. The victory cemented Robert's control of the Stormlands, and he was able to march on the Reach and Riverlands with no enemy to his rear. Yet not all of Robert's bannermen sided with him. Sir Barristan the Bold came from the Stormlands, but as the pre-eminent member of Aerys Kingsguard and greatest knight in the realm, Sir Barristan remained loyal. After Robert's decisive victory on the Trident, Robert sent his own maester to care for his countryman Sir Barristan, who had suffered grievous wounds whilst fighting so hard to kill him. Later, when the Kingslayer betrayed Aerys, Robert pardoned Sir Barristan, and even took him onto his own Kingsguard. When Robert lifted Mace Tyrell's ill-managed siege of Storm's End and returned to his ancestral home, he realized the dream of all the Stormlords before him, to rule the 7 kingdoms. Then Robert died, and his brother Stannis killed their other brother, the noble King Renly, with black magic. Now the Stormlands again live up to their name, with so many houses burnt on the Blackwater and others currying favour with the Lannisters to seize the survivors' lands. Renly could have saved us.
Exactly.
Only I could have saved him. But I will teach Stannis a lesson he should have learnt growing up in the Stormlands. As lightning gives way to thunder, so too must murder lead to vengeance.
Honestly, I feel like... Well, I guess I'm just thinking about the alternative. I'm just like... Either Stannis or Renly could have been cool, but... Any one of them was the better alternative than Joffrey. So...
Impregnable. That's
by the way, season 4, everyone's clear in season 3, but season 4, we have an addition to the blacklist. Try to guess who it is.
Vale sees itself, shielded from Westeros by its mountains. They call the entrance to their land the Bloody Gate because, during the Age of Heroes, a dozen armies supposedly smashed themselves against it. Even if they'd gotten through, the roads of the Vale are narrow, steep, and treacherous. Half their men would have slipped to their deaths, or frozen in the mountain snow. Or so the common wisdom goes. Except the Vale has been conquered. Those vaunted mountains didn't stop the Andals who came by the Eastern Sea. The people of the Vale say that Sir Artus Arryn, the Andal general, flew on the back of a giant falcon and slew the Griffin King on top of the tallest mountain. During Aegon's conquest, one of his sisters did the same, flying her dragon over the Bloody Gate and up to the Eyrie, the Arryn stronghold. And the Arryn boy king yielded the Vale in return for a ride on the beast. Do you sense the theme here? The rationalizing of defeats with mythical beasts and the whims of children, instead of acknowledging the root cause, the arrogance of isolation. The men of the Vale are so proud of their mountains, they can't abide any flaw in them. As with the mountains, so too with their blood. The first Andals landed in the Vale as its most powerful lords, the Arryns, the Waynwoods, the Corbrays, like to brag. Through their veins runs the blood of the oldest Andal nobility in Westeros. But through their brains runs an even older folly. That blood matters. If it did, those pure-born lords should have been able to exterminate the hill tribes centuries ago. But those primitive raiders, whose tribes more resemble kennels than families, continue to plague the Vale.
Yo, because I had to at least watch one of the videos and the impressions. One of the things was taught. Now I can't not think about it now. Like, especially when I'm just hearing your voice and seeing these images and not seeing you actually talk. Saying like how how Baelish like make sure he enunciates every single vowel. Like I'm not about to look it up and show you because like I said, that wasn't the video that I was talking about, but I had to instantly scroll up.
Even kidnapping an Arryn once. Until Tyrion Lannister, an outsider, no Vale Lord ever thought to turn the tribes to the Vale's advantage. That a desperate, warlike people could be useful, not to mention inexpensive. But perhaps the Vale Lords consider such thoughts beneath them. After all, the Vale's isolation does breed an abundance of honor and pious bleating, which governs their decisions instead of foresight. Like a blind man who can only guess where his horse is taking him. I doubt Jon Arryn had even prepared for civil war when he raised his banners instead of handing over his young wards, Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon, to the Mad King. Honor demanded, and Lord Arryn obeyed. He'd have done the same if the boys hadn't been the lords of two great houses, who could field mighty armies of their own. But perhaps I give him too little credit. After all, if the war went against them, only Lord Arryn had a nice, impregnable castle to retreat into, and he was wise enough to take poor Lysa Tully into his bed to win the Riverlands as allies. Jon Arryn won, then Jon Arryn died. Wisely, the Vale stayed out of all the ensuing chaos. Its crops did not burn or wither in the fields from lack of men to tend them. Its strength was not drained by forced marches to futile skirmishes. In the Vale, life proceeds as it always has. Calm, proud. A world of high honor undisturbed by armies and men of low birth, but high ambition. Impregnable.